Graham and I had just been to the Chelsea Flower Show, and we were walking back, and I saw this from a distance, and I said, "What on earth is that?" And we had to go up and have a look at it. And I had tried to grow this plant, but I planted it in sun. It doesn't like sun. It's a very soft foliage plant. It won't take any frost at all. It just goes to mush, the first frost that we have. But it just gets better and better and better as the nights become longer, until suddenly one day there's a frost and bang, it's gone. And so I have a little clump outside my office window where I'm sitting now, in complete shade, doesn't get any sun at all, and it is just brilliant.
Hello and welcome to another East Ruston Old Vicarage Talking Dirty special, all about the amazing things happening in the garden in November. It is still performing, even if sadly the public are no longer there to enjoy it. But over at aforementioned garden, we have Alan Edward Herbert Gray, our happy and very handsome horticulturalist, channeling his inner Dennis the Menace in his stripes.
Oh dear, watch out. Well, thank you for that lovely warm welcome. I mean, it's nice to have you in the garden if I haven't got people, because, you know, it's very empty at the moment, and I do miss not having people. But it's that time of year now where we're gradually taking everything out of our big pots, you know, to put them under cover so that they have a safe winter, hopefully. And we were chatting a little while ago. There's a particular picture that I sent you of some fastigiate tulip trees. And they are glowing absolutely, as Nancy Lancaster would say, rich butter yellow. But they haven't glowed sufficiently, really, because we've been 18 days without sunshine. And so therefore I couldn't take a photograph with them in full sun, which is a great shame, but never mind.
No, couldn't do them full justice. They're a glorious trio of trees. And it's not a shot we normally get to see because it's from an upstairs window. And at the very bottom, it gives some perspective to it. If you know the size of the brugmansias, you've got these absolutely huge brugmansias in pots, sort of dwarfed by this sort of view beyond them of the trees above in the sky. Of course, the view even more changed, not just by the seasons and the leaves falling from the trees and the light levels shifting, but the brugmansias themselves going away, going to bed. That big overhaul that happens in your garden at this time of year.
Well, exactly. I looked at that photograph and I thought, but a distant memory. I mean, it was only 3 or 4 days ago, but brugmansias, suddenly they're gone. I mean, the tubs are now empty because they've been put away for the winter. So hopefully they don't, come to any harm during the winter, to come out next spring 2025 and do their stuff all over again. But I looked out the window and I suddenly saw these empty tubs where they'd been. And I thought, but a distant memory.
But that's what happens at this time of year. Obviously, ever changing. Fortunately, with the kind of planting you have at East Ruston, there is just so much sort of every day walking along and seeing some other floral explosion, some new plant tucked away, or of course some big dramatic thing for you to enjoy. I mean, the nerines, you did a post on Instagram. Go and follow East Ruston Old Vicarage on Instagram if you don't already. And you said Nerine Heaven, I think. And just the array, the different tonal colours you managed to get from those wonderful triumphant blooms. They've just got so much pizzazz, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. It's one of those things that I think, you've got to be a bit of a nutter to have a collection of those, because they spend the greater part of the year doing absolutely nothing. Most of the brightly coloured ones are in pots that are under glass. But I mean, we do have some outside, but the brilliant scarlet ones. And there's that rich, dark sort of mulberry coloured one that fades to grey. And I mean, that's the most amazing colour change. But they are tender, and so they're under glass. But to have them at the end of the season, when everything else outside is kind of fading and everything, and then you've got this vibrant collection. But the trouble is, you see, when you buy these plants, quite often these nerines, they're sold to you as a flowering size bulb, and you plant it and you have a whole year's wait and it doesn't flower. But it will do it when it's ready. And I mean, this year, I think we've got more than ever in flower. I bought a whole collection of Ed Brown at Cotswold Garden Flowers, and he I think he took over a national collection of them, and he very kindly sent me a selection of them. I said to him, can I buy some? And he said, well, which ones do you want? Because I can't. I said, well, I want, you send me what you've got, and I will be grateful, which I am. And because some of them are exceedingly rare, and it's probably only got 3 bulbs, and I mean, he's not going to give me one. Well, I wouldn't give him one.
However good a plantsman he might be. Do you know the name of that lovely plummy one? Because that you get used to a certain Nerine shade, I suppose, and that one
Yeah, I can
really,
look it up. I don't know the name off
yeah,
the top of my head. No, I'm
immediately
sorry.
strikes you as unusual. We'll put it in the plant list. We'll make sure we find it.
Yeah.
So when we put the plant list
Mm.
together, it's in there. If you're listening to the audio version, you can go and scroll down to the bottom of the show notes and be put out
There
your
are other
misery.
places you can go to look at nearings, and one of them's on the Rothschild website. And I'm not quite sure which house it's at, but which house? We. What sort of people are they? Well, I guess you know they were bankers, and they're rather well heeled, shall we say? Um, but I mean, they have a huge collection there of nerines, and I mean, I think they actually guide you through their greenhouse where they're in flower, and it just looks absolutely stunning.
What is the
Um,
secret with Nerines for people who've either not grown them or not done well with them? What do you have to do to get the best out of them?
Well, you plant them if you imagine the bulb with the bulb's neck, you plant them with their neck and shoulders, their décolletage, above the ground, so that they're in full sun because they love to be baked during the summer, and that is their dormant period. The problem with the nerines that we grow outside and to some extent under glass is that they're winter leafers. That means the ones outside, if we had heavy frost and lots of snow, the foliage would be damaged. But under glass, of course, they can be fine. But the main criteria really is to give them that summer baking and summer rest, because that initiates the flowering. And then when you get to about September, I suppose, beginning of, you can start watering them. And don't overwater, but wait until the leaves start to emerge. And you'll get leaves emerging first, and then hopefully the flowers will follow. Simple,
Useful.
really.
Yeah. Talking of flowering bulbs, Iris unguicularis making an appearance in your garden as well.
Yeah, it's strange that Iris unguicularis is in a piece of garden which is it's not new. It's been there, but it was under another guise, and it's recently been altered because it's going to be well, Matt's been very busy. They're building a vast gateway, which is going to be known as the Pharaoh's Gate. And when you see it, you perhaps understand why. It's quite monolithic and very Egyptian, and and the other side of that Pharaoh's Gate, which is the southern south side, we're remodeling that piece of garden, and there to the edge of that piece of garden, there's some clumps of Iris unguicularis, which is called the Algerian iris because that's where it comes from. And the Algerian iris flowers from September. You get the first one or two, and then right the way through until perhaps even March or April, but only a few blooms at a time. And if you want to do this, it's a very interesting thing to do. I mean, you won't do it every day, but if you look among their sort of grassy foliage and you see a pointed, sort of grey, shimmery looking bud, if you put the grasp that firmly but gently underneath the base of the bud and just gently pull, it will pull out of its stem. And then you can put it in a little wine glass, an antique one, of course, on your wonderful antique mahogany table. And in the evening, in the heat, you can watch it unfurl and it will actually open. In the evening. It lasts about 2 or 3 days, that's all. But I mean, it's a nice thing to see it. And of course, they are exquisitely scented. I mean, like lots of things that bloom in the winter, we don't realize this. Lots of plants that bloom in the winter, they are very scented because there are very few pollinators about, and they want to attract what there is.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's a plant. I bought, I think, probably a sackful from somebody. They'd been digging it all up and all the rest of it. And I put the clumps all the way along the front of the Californian border, which is next to the desert. And they look right in their setting because they come from these sort of very dry, arid areas. I mean, there are several name forms of them if you can find them. There's one called Mary Barnard and one called Walter Butt. I don't know what we've got. It's probably the bog standard ordinary one, but I'm quite happy with that because it's mauve, it's marvelous, and it does very, very well.
I do love East Ruston, never doing anything by halves. By a whole drift of Iris unguicularis brought in to sit on a mahogany table, and there they are with their Pharaoh's Gate. I can't wait to see it in real life. Talking of scented plants, you'd sent over, I mean, I haven't smelled it, so I'm only assuming it's scented, but you sent over an amazing looking cestrum, a beautiful cestrum. Is that smelling nice?
Not really. That doesn't smell as nice as it looks, actually. Um, it's a plant I've had for many, many years, and then I lost it. It's not terribly hardy, I have to say, and it's sitting in the kitchen courtyard against the wall there that faces south. And that wall is a bit like a jungle at the end of the summer because plus so many things need that shelter. And it's having its second flowering of the year. And I noticed several things in the garden are doing that. But I mean, that's because we had this kind of rotten summer, I think, really. And then we suddenly get to a period where we had about second half of July and we start to have a bit of warmth and off they go again. But no, it's a second flowering. And I did actually I think I've taken about 40 cuttings of it because people were wanting it last year.
I bet. Lovely
Well,
little dark pink flowers. The foliage looks
hmm,
beautiful as well.
Cestrum fasciculatum Newellii, I think.
Glad you said that because I was just looking at my notes and I couldn't read my own writing. Do tell us about the Cestrum with the unpronounceable name.
Well, I had it. First of all, I had it as a conservatory plant, and it grew in the Pelly house in a huge pot. And it got to the stage where it was so full in the pot, I couldn't find another pot big enough to repot it. And so I mean, first of all, planted it along the front of the house, and it lived there for a good few years. And then I suppose we had a hard winter and it succumbed, I think. And then I now I didn't have a replacement handy. And then I went to see a friend of mine who grows very unusual plants. And he had three plants of it. And I said, are there any of those for sale? He said, you can have one if you wish. I said, oh, thank you very much. So I bought one. And I've had it ever since. And I mean, the reason I probably took all these cuttings really is not just because people want to buy it, but I want to be sure that I have a replacement should we have an uncommonly cold winter, just in case.
Yeah.
So it's an heir and a spare, really, but it is a lovely thing. It flowers very, very early in the year, so you really need a good spring, and then it will start flowering in April, and then it has a rest in midsummer, and it starts again in October.
And maybe not delightfully scented, but I know something that certainly is a lovely little purple lilac-y wonder that you sent a photo across to me. And for a moment, I just could not place it. I couldn't work out what it was. I'll own up to that. And then you said the name, and I thought, of course, I'm being daft.
No, you're not, because it's not plants you see every day, and it's a little Parma violet called Palme de Toulouse, I think, and it. It flowers throughout the winter and into the spring, and therefore it needs shelter because if it's outside, it gets mucked up by the weather and everything. And I had three pots of it, and I think it was given to me originally by Jane Ann Walton, actually. And I don't know whether I've got the name right that she gave me, but somebody else who's good in the world of violas named it for me because I lost the label. And anyway, I just keep it in a pot, and it stands outside where it gets watered in the summer in a sort of semi-shaded area, sort of minding its own business. And then you go and look at it, and I find it, and I found the three pots of it, and I thought, oh, I must repot these. So I repotted them, and I put them in the Pelly house, and they don't have huge flushes of flower, and they perhaps only have 5 or 6 blooms out per pot at any one time. And it's something that you grow if you care enough about it, because they have a scent like no other. I mean, talking about the Rothschilds again, they had a vast collection of these Parma violets, which they grew under glass. And they were grown under glass, literally to pick tiny little posies for little glass bowls to stand in the house. Because, I mean, let's go back to the Victorian period. If anything, they wanted something that made the house smell nice. Hence the vogue for scented pelargoniums, scented leaf pelargoniums. Anyway, so I put these repotted Parma violets in my Pelly house, and it doesn't get terribly hot in there. So, I mean, these don't like a lot of heat. They're the kind of plants that would grow well in Chile, where the temperature varies very little. And I think I opened the door the other morning when I went in. So I parked my trolley in there overnight because it's closest to the office, and it was getting dark, and I thought, why not? Opened the door, and the smell was just amazing. It was absolutely lovely, and
Oh,
it takes you back to the days of grannies and grandfathers, I suppose. When people had time and they used to grow things like that, and it's easy to propagate because it makes little runners, and if you got the way of doing it, I do it. I take their pot and I put it somewhere I know I can leave it. And as the runners grow, I have little pots around the mother pot, and you just peg them down with a piece of wire shaped like a hairpin. It doesn't have to be strong wire because they will root then into the pots, and then you can sever their umbilical cord with their mother, And off they go for a life of their own. So they're lovely things to have. And they're the kind of things that I don't know, they make life so interesting because they're not showy, they're not flashy, but they're flashy in another sort of way. They assault your olfactory senses in the most sensitive way that, you think, what the heck is that? It's wonderful.
And
I
yours,
wouldn't do that.
lovely little ruffled lilac-y flower.
Well, they're
Absolutely
sort of a
delightful.
dark lilac on the outside and sort of paler in the middle. They're a double violet, actually. It's a very messy flower. And I mean, that in itself is a beauteous thing, I think.
Yeah. And I so dream of a point in my life where I am not only growing them, but actually picking them and bringing them in. I will do that one day. It won't be any day soon, not least because that little vase would just go straight over. Little grabby hands would get it. But I look forward to that. I aspire to that in the same way that I aspire to a potting shed like yours one day. I think we all do. It's like the potting shed of dreams. With you were sharing this thing on the radio because if you've never heard us do a little plug for it, Sundays 11 till 1 across BBC Radio Norfolk, Suffolk, and Cambridgeshire. We do the garden party, gardening phone in, answering questions, but also deviating off into a myriad tangents and talking about as many plants and as much gardening stuff as we can. And Alan was sharing this wonderful picture of being tucked up in the potting shed and the wood burner on and the dogs asleep in their basket. And the only downside was that it got dark and then you were having to maraud your way through these very, very dark paths to find your way back to the house. But apart until it got to that point in the story, I was dreaming of that lovely.
Well, I must say that the potting shed does um, evoke a certain fascination with visitors. I mean, they get to look in. There's a door at either end, and I mean, I just put a barrier up. I don't. I put I just a hole leaning across the door. Otherwise, they'd all be in there, and I wouldn't get any work done at all. But the comments are absolutely superb. Oh, look at that! Look at the tools all hanging. Isn't it tidy?
Yeah, I was
But it's
particularly
just,
impressed. You said on the radio that you always like to tidy up before you leave of an evening, which I cannot say has ever been me in my
I
life.
think
So.
I think if you're working on your potting bench. It's like your desk at the office, isn't it? I mean, you don't leave it in a mess and walk back to it the next morning. You just tidy your papers and put them right and everything else. And I would like to sweep my potting bench. So I've got a nice clean potting bench to start the day with. And anything else that I need or I don't need for tomorrow, I put away. So it's not, I mean, I'm not overly tidy by any means, as you know.
Well, again, things I aspire to, tidying up the potting bench at the end of the day, that would be very, very exciting for me. And for anyone who lives with me, who would love it if I would put things away at the end of the day. It's called 4D spread in this house, the vast quantity of things that just spread
You
around
know,
me.
I have one of those, except it's a Graham spread. And I'll give you a little instance of that this morning. Did you put my jacket away yesterday? Yes.
Yes, I'm always saying things to Peter like that. See X, Y, and Z, like, yes, I put it away, or yes, it's in that cupboard, or yes, it's so yeah. I know where you're going with that. Flowers, exciting, wonderful flowers. Your Begonia luxurians.
Yeah, again, you see, there's a strange looking plant, and the flowers are not spectacular, or are they?
Wow.
I mean, it's a huge bunch of tiny, tiny, tiny flowers. Looks a bit like aruncus, I suppose, or goat's beard, that kind of thing, if you know what that is. And I mean, these ones are several years old, and Ian was actually taking them down for me the other day, and he said, "We'll keep those, won't we?" And I said, "Well, are they too big to keep?" No, 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 we'll keep. Because to put a big plant out next year as opposed to a smaller one waiting for it to grow, and they take probably, I don't know, 5 years to get to 4 or 5 feet, whatever it is they are. And so they're worth taking care of, at least not too many of them, but a couple. Um, because they're statement plants, and beside the door there, they do actually look rather nice.
Yeah, those big fingers of their leaves.
Oh yes, yes, very, very palmate leaves, like a
That's
palm tree.
the one from your north-facing door planting, I assume,
It
from
is,
your
yes.
yeah, your
Yeah, yeah.
shady front door. And of
Mm.
course, that is one of those plants that brings you both the foliage and the flower. I mean, that I obviously people generally grow it for the foliage, but actually, I'm very taken with those flowers.
We replaced them with a pair of hollies, and they're not anything special, and they're not a special variety at all. But they're hollies that we're in the process of training. We're training them into a very narrow, tall column, and they've been outside the greenhouse for the summer. And I snip, snip, snip at them occasionally if I think they're getting too wide because I want them to be very narrow and very tall and very elegant. And they're both females, obviously, because they've got berries on them. And it occurred to me the other day, I wonder how long those berries will last because as soon as the birds deem that they're ripe enough to eat, I'll tell you a story. I did a Christmas wreath for my door one day, which I made entirely out of the deciduous holly called Ilex verticillata, and it was just a wreath of red berries. And I was going somewhere, and I came out the door and I shut it behind me, and I looked at the wreath, and I thought, that wreath's dropping its berries on the top already. But it wasn't dropping them; it was the birds, and they started at the top, and literally 3 days later, it was a wreath of twigs. So I'm afraid out came some artificial berries.
Even Alan will go for the old artificial berry. It's actually nice. I was coming back from toddler swimming this morning and I saw a lady. She'd parked her pram, her child, and she was taking photos of someone's Callicarpa as she was,
Yeah.
walking along. And I know, I mean, that's definitely a plant which divides people. My partner cannot stand it. He thinks it looks fake, but there's something
Well,
extraordinary about it.
I thought it looked fake when I first encountered it many years ago, because it's such a bright purple color. It's just unreal. It is unreal. I mean, it's very, that's all you can say about it. Unfortunately, it's one of those plants that looks fabulous once the leaves are dropped. And for that short time that the berries are there, it's so interesting and such a talking point. But thereafter, it's such a drab thing. I mean, as soon as the leaves come out, I mean, forget it. You wouldn't even look at it. So it really needs to be planted with something in front of it that's better than it, if you see what I mean, when it's in leaf. And then, you can enjoy it when in the winter.
All about being clever with gardening, which I'm still aspiring to. It's funny. There are so many extraordinary things in your garden, and yet of all of the various photos you've flung over on WhatsApp and which I've sort of been drooling over, the one, and maybe this is predictable for me, but the one that I'm so
I
charmed by
did, I
is
did
is
think so.
it's your nasturtiums. You've got one really stunning nasturtium, and you know what? It's not peachy. It's a nasturtium which has grabbed my attention, which is not in a sunset shade. It's more of a pink. But foliage combinations. There's a little calendula in shot to just give that little splash of orange to complement what else is going on. I thought that was magic.
Well, that was a complete happy accident because that was taken out in a pot outside our vegetable greenhouse. And outside the vegetable greenhouse, the pots were cleared early on because anyone that grows nasturtiums will know that they're when they're over, they're best removed. So we removed the nasturtiums, we kept some seed, and obviously some seed got dropped in the top of that pot. It didn't get replanted, and that's just what came up. And so between September and November, we had nasturtiums coming into flower, and as you said, that wonderful little lovely calendula. So there's one nasturtium that is doing particularly well at the back of that little group, which has all those lovely rosy pink flowers on it. And then there's one to the right, which I think is lemon with a sort of red splash in the heart. And that was what they all were in that pot. So where the pink ones come from, I know not, but
Well, that's very. I'm charmed by the pink one. I think that's rather
yeah.
special.
It's nice when happy accidents like that happen, though, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I always think that the nice thing about nasturtiums is not necessarily what colour they are, what they do, or anything else, but I like them to tell me when there's been a frost in the garden, because nasturtiums are one of the first things that show their disgust at extreme cold or frosty cold. And I will know immediately by looking at my nasturtiums just how cold it's been. I have out inside, maximum minimum thermometers all over the place and all the rest of it, but let the plants do the talking.
Talking of plants going over in containers, of course, a photo, probably one of the most popular photos I've ever shared on our Get Gardening Instagram of Alan is him betwixt two enormous Empress Wu hostas in containers. And Alan is there largely to give scale to these plants. And obviously hostas, I mean, they do die often in a very charming way.
Yeah, I know. I know. And I've had several people write to me or email me in alarm that they suddenly think, my hosta's dying. It's the most awful bright orange or orange yellow color. Whatever's wrong with it? And it's not. It's just the way hostas die. And, some do it more than others, but I mean, hosta leaves do turn vibrant shades of yellow and gold before they just disintegrate into a messy mass. But that Empress Wu, I walked past it the other day and I just looked at it and it's got at its feet, it's got that blue fern called Pteris, Pteras, something or other. and the contrast between the two, I just sort of thought, oh, that's a nice novel little photograph. Come on, we'll have that one.
Yes.
You know,
We'll have some of that. Of course, it's just such a fabulous point in the year, really, where you've got lots of autumn colour blazing. You've got things, sometimes like with hostas, it's a brief moment to capture the blue of the terrace, the sort of melting
yeah,
gold of those hosta leaves. And then you've got flowers coming through. You've got that like fresh sort of new vibe of something like an iris unguicularis, or of course the autumn snowdrops as well, which I know you've got several of
yeah.
in your garden.
Yes, Backhouse is one of the ones that's flowering at the moment, and I think they're all a bit confused anyway. I mean, the snowdrop from reginae-olgae varieties, they're all early flowering, most of them anyway, and they will be what we call the autumn flowering snowdrops. And I mean, remember when many years ago a lady came to the garden and she brought me two from her garden that were in flower, and she didn't have that many, but just thought how kind it was of her to give them to me. And then, of course, on the other side, a lady came in October and she was looking at the garden and she saw me on the way out and she said, I don't know, snowdrops in October. Oh, and off she went. But of course, everyone that knows snowdrops knows that you can have them in flower from September until probably April or even maybe into May. Brian Ellis is the great snowdrop guru, and Joe, of course. They know that they know the snowdrop season. I think Brian has them out in his garden all throughout that period. It's just lovely.
It's nice if you're a Galanthus, you can start to get excited ahead of like the main sort of peak of the season, I suppose, when you get all the snowdrop sales. There's something to pique your interest for months.
Well, I'll give you a little plug, shall I? Because I think it's on February the 2nd. We have a snowdrop day here when we'll have Joe and hopefully Brian will be here too, and several other people that sell snowdrops. And you know, interesting. Not just snowdrops though. There's lots more interesting early things, early plants that are doing their stuff that perhaps if you're getting into gardening, you won't know about, and it extends the season. And so, I mean, I've always been against the idea of putting the garden to bed, and yet we do, but not to bed permanently. I mean, I'm out in it every day, so I'm looking at it and I'm seeing this changes, which become slower and more subtle as winter increases its coldness and short day lengths and all the rest of it. But it's still there. And still, I mean, one of the things that, I mean, as well as snowdrops, I got them from Joe last year, a selection of Arum maculatum. And, I planted the bulbs and suddenly up appearing of these lovely veined and patterned leaves. Um, and, summer to come, some are there already. And it's just this ongoing thing of moving from the hosta dies, the arums appear. So one takes over from another. It's fascinating.
Talking of, beautiful patterned leaves, one of the plants I think people would potentially be quite interested to take inspiration from your garden, something to pep up their own plots potentially at this time of year, was the Griselinia you sent me a photo of, which had fantastic leaves.
Well, yeah, I mean, Griselinias, I mean, if I go back 30 years, you probably didn't see them that much grown in England. Go over to Ireland and they're two a penny and they make vast, vast tall hedges. And they're doing the same thing over here now, Griselinia littoralis. We've got it probably 12 feet tall, with the sides clipped near our back gate. A lovely, lovely plant. The thing about the colour of the green is that it's a very rich light green, if you like, and the leaves have this lovely soapy texture. So it's bright and it's light and I mean, if you go, most evergreens, take rhododendrons, ugh, dull. To a certain extent, dull, churchyards, but, think of laurel. Laurel is a lovely light reflecting leaf. I know it's not a fashionable plant at the moment, but I do like it. And I like the Griselinia and the variegated. I've got several variegated kinds, and I think the one I've sent you a picture of is Dixon's cream, I think it's known as, and it has a cream splash in the center of the leaf. Some of the others have a cream margin or a yellow margin to the leaf, which is more traditional in the way of variegation. But I do like variegation when it's bold and plants are randomly, they've got chunks of gold on or cream on them, rather than having lots of little bits where it looks as if it's been splashed with weed killer.
we won't get into Fatsia spider's web. Though I was looking out of my window. I mean, I'm always just amazed any part of my garden that looks even remotely okay. And it was sort of the Acer was nice and red and bright,
Yeah.
and my ribes was doing some nice autumn colour, and my cotinus behind it. And then just down in the corner, my spider's web was adding a little glint of bright variegation. And I thought, you know what, considering the amount of effort this garden has had in the last 19, 20 months, I'm not unhappy with that.
No, no, but it's good. You see, that's the foundation. I mean, all those things that you just mentioned there, those plants, they're all what I call foundation plants,
Mm.
and they will come and do their stuff through the year with very little intervention from you. But they are, I mean, take Fatsia japonica spider's web. When I first saw that plant in a 2 litre pot, small plant, I thought, oh gosh, it's disgusting. It looks as if it's been sprayed with weed killer inadvertently. And anyway, we planted some in our woodland garden. And I didn't take much notice of them. And then probably 2 or 3 years later, I actually looked at them properly. And by this time, they'd grown into a sizable plant, about a metre tall. And I thought they looked rather nice.
Yeah, there you go.
So it's, a plant has personality when it gets a little bit bigger. And that's when, well, I appreciate it. I think most other people do as well.
Yeah. Some plants, it's just worth reconsidering them, thinking again, maybe if you see a different one in a different situation, maybe supported by a different plant. I mean, combinations, they completely set plants off differently. So,
Well, I mean, if you take the common old buddleia, there are some now very dwarf little buddleias, obviously bred for people with smaller gardens and to sell the plants because they can become ungainly and a bit big. And Robin Lane Fox, who writes in the gardening column in the Financial Times on a Saturday, he was waxing lyrical about them the other day. So I looked at my wholesalers list and he had some on the list. So I got 3 plants of each just to see how well they do. And they've arrived and I'm looking at them and I'm looking down on them. They're a little dome like this, about a foot tall, 30 centimeters in this pot. And I thought, oh, you're a dear little blob, aren't you? But I mean, I don't know, you see, because they came from a Dutch lorry. So have they possibly been dwarfed with a dwarfing agent to make them more saleable in their first year? And are they going to, when they suddenly get their feet into the proper garden soil, are they going to expand and open up and smile? Which is what I hope they will do, but not be huge plants. I would think they look as if they might grow to be about a metre tall. And I think they have an extended flowering period too, because not many people bother with it because it's too much of a task. But if you deadhead buddleia, I mean, you can get if you've got the patience to do it, and the plant is small enough. I mean, it would flower and flower and flower. You get
mm,
3 lots of flowers before it finishes.
yeah. I have a real Marmite buddleia. There's a variegated one with really
Yeah.
quite zingy flowers, which I imagine
Yeah.
some people see and hate. And I was coveting it when I was working. I was with my mum at a craft fair, and Jelly Cottage Plants, Michaela was there. Well, she wasn't actually there, but she'd heard that I was coveting this plant. Word had got back to her, so it got given to me at the end of the day, which was incredibly kind of her. And so I came home with a buddleia, which I can't say the other half's much of a buddleia fan, so I'm not sure he was all that pleased. But it just sits really nicely, sort of in my poor neglected garden. That lovely splash of colour and those glorious flowers, and it just nestles amidst the roses and the cotinus and stuff, and it just looks. I think it looks nice anyway.
Yeah, it is. It's a bright variegation too, isn't it? Because it's
Yeah,
quite bright yellow, the
yeah.
variegation on it. But I think the yellow with the contrast of those rich, plummy, bright purple flowers is stunning.
There we go. And you heard from Alan Gray, and if he thinks it's stunning, I'm happy with that.
Oh
I said it
dear.
with some trepidation. I didn't know how it was going to go down. It's not a plant I think we've ever discussed before on Talking Dirty. So
Well, no, it's true. But I mean, I know what you mean. You see, but then variegated plants are a bit like Marmite to some people. You either like them or you don't. I like some of them and I don't like others. I mean, the late great Christopher Lloyd had a discussion with me on variegated leaves, and he said, "What do you think about variegated leaves?" And I said, well, I don't like the variegation on a laurel, where it's all spotty and looks as if it's been sprayed with weed killer. But I do like this pittosporum, whichever one it was, variegated leaf on the pittosporum. He said, well, why? And I said, because the pittosporum leaf is much smaller. The stems on it are dark. It's got lovely undulating edges to the foliage and it's shiny. And he said, so is the laurel. I said, I know, but it lacks grace. Well, he said, there you are.
we all need someone in that like that in our lives to make us analyze why, get down into the
Yes,
nitty gritty.
he was a
Why?
great one for that. I mean, he liked debate, shall we say. But it made you look at things properly. I think artists see this, you see, because they've got it in their mind to replicate what they're seeing in front of them on a piece of paper with whatever medium they choose, and so they will see the detail. But lots of ordinary mortals probably miss an awful lot,
It's one of my
unless they're
favorite
told.
things. Yes, unless they're told. One of my favorite things about taking photographs of the garden is you do see it differently. You can, particularly zooming in on flowers and really analysing all those details you might
Absolutely.
miss with the human eye. I absolutely love doing that. It has
Yeah.
been an absolute joy as ever, Mr. Gray, to hear about the garden this month. I'm already looking forward to hearing about it in December. And I'm sorry that these podcasts are, only monthly at the moment. We always endeavour to do more, but time gets away. It's a busy old life.
But you've got to live, and you've got to live, and you've got to look after, haven't you?
Indeed. Stop
Love to Theo.
my little danger man from trying to brain himself in every way possible.
Yeah, I haven't seen him for ages, so he's going to be changed but the next time I see him because children grow up so fast, don't they?
Oh, they certainly do. He's like a little cherub and just as impish as any cherub you've ever seen in one of those like gorgeous wall
Takes
paintings
after you then, does he?
with daddy's curls. Oh, it's been a treat. Alan, thank you very much for letting us in on the behind the scenes action at our favourite garden. And we cannot wait to set foot in it again. Snowdrop Day was 2nd of February.
2nd of February, yeah.
Date for
Yeah.
the diary.
And then the day we actually open, I looked it up the other day, and I think it's a Saturday, the 1st of March, I believe, which is my birthday.
Of course it is, yes. Well, it'll be here before we know it.
Yeah, exactly.
Until December, when it will be ever closer to Christmas, which I, for one, am very much looking forward to. Until then,
Have you started your Christmas shopping yet?
only for you.
I've done several. I'm quite pleased with myself this year. But the trouble is, when I buy presents, they're always ones I want to keep myself. C'est la vie.
Happy gardening.
Happy gardening. Well, hello.
Coming. I don't know. I'm coming.
I have washed my clothes since Sunday.
I was wearing this. Different trousers on Sunday. I'll try and put that cushion looks rubbish.
My head's not too near the top.
Yeah, well, mine's a little near the top. In honesty, I'm just trying to get rid of some of the clutter at the top of my room. And moving. Hang on, the dog's getting excited in the background because Peter's come in. He's home very early. He was coming home earlier. He was coming this early. This is a very busy household today. Until and at that moment you froze. You froze in such a happy, smiley way. That was like,
Oh, did I?
yeah, you froze in this like perfect smile. Anyway.
We could make this up as we go along, couldn't we, really? Except we don't do that, everybody. I must say we don't.
We don't.
We do endeavour to get the numbers right.